building permit fees. Today's April 1st of 2025, and the time's 3 p.m. That said, I'm Byron McDaniel. I am the District 3 Commissioner and Chairman of the Board. I'll go to my left here. We'll start with you, Mike, if you'll do your introduction.
Sure, Mike Buck, District 1 Vice Chair. Sorry.
Hello, Mark Denreader, Director of Community and Economic Development.
Hello, Rob Dana, Chief Building Official for the Building Department.
Hello, Sean Fletcher, Elbert County Manager.
Don Schroeder, Commissioner, District 2.
All right, Mark, we'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, staff, fellow citizens, Mark Denreader. As the Chairman indicated, we are discussing building permit fees, and we did have a discussion on this topic, as you recall, on February 5th of this year in a work study session just like this. And during that session, we talked about the data inputs to do the building permit fees, the different components, the permit, plan review, and then the use tax. We also looked at 7 other jurisdictions to compare fees on 2 different scenarios, examples. One was a pole barn and one was a single family residence. Of the 7 jurisdictions, to refresh your memory, we looked at 5 counties. We looked at Douglas, Lincoln, Arapahoe, El Paso, and Jefferson counties, and then 2 municipalities, the town of Castle Rock and the town of Elizabeth. We examined the calculations, the different inputs of the other jurisdictions, and then when we, when you looked at the scenarios that we ran, Elbert County was the second highest compared to the other counties, and then both the towns were higher than Elbert County. We now have some concrete suggestions or options for you, the BOCC, to consider. The options primarily center around fees that impact the average homeowner in Elbert County. For example, people that want to build a detached garage or a pole barn, a greenhouse, a storage shed, those types of applications. Or finish a basement. Maybe they want to do an interior remodel or complete a garage. In the handout that was provided to you gentlemen, there are items A through E, and we'll start with A. Letter A, you may consider having, and this has to do with the International Building Code Council building valuation table that building departments use. And you may want to look at using the most current version of that. And that is, the current version is on page 9 in your handout, and what we are using is on page 6. The ICC, again, the International Code Council, updates this table every 6 months. Elbert County, as you recall, is using the August 22 version, and that was passed by the Board of County Commissioners back in January of 2023. So the question before you here today, just to, for just consideration, would be to update this table every 6 months in line with the ICC, or if you wanted to do it just once a year, that's another option, of course. 4 of those jurisdictions that we studied actually are using a 2024 table as an example. The price per square foot on those tables do fluctuate over time, so each iteration or version that comes out every 6 months, you'll see the price per square foot does change. The second consideration, letter B, would be to use a modifier.
Hey, Mark.
Yes, sir.
If we could, let's go through A, discuss it.
Sounds great.
B, discuss it. That way we don't get a full presentation. Yep. And you're going to do a great job on the presentation. I know that. Sir. But what happens is you get so far ahead, then we got to backtrack all the way to the beginning. So if we could do that, if there's no objection from the other commissioners.
Yeah, thank you for the idea. Very, very good. So yeah, back to A, just looking at that ICC table and whether y'all want to stick with what we have, the 2022 version, or go with a current version. The current one is actually February 2025, or, you could, so do it every 6 months or do it once a year.
I got an opinion. If I would think we should do the previous year, so 2024, similar to, I think you said 4 out of 7 of the other counties were implementing, rather than trying to do 2025 in the middle of the year, they're changing it. So depending on when you got your application in or submitted for a permit, you may or may pay something different, but any time during 2025, you automatically know you go to the 2024 table.
Yeah.
So in 2026, you go to the 2025 table, rather than trying to figure out, well, if they changed it in February, it just simplifies it a little bit, I think. And it keeps you fairly current.
You don't go to 25?
Well, I think you do a follow year. Right now, I think we're 2022.
Correct.
Right.
So they're following 3 years in the rears. But I just thought it would be simpler to just follow. They don't change much. If you look at the numbers, they change a very small amount. Yeah, so it's not that big of a deal. But I think just for simplicity's sake, rather than somebody in the middle of a project trying to figure out, well, when are we going to actually pull the permit? What's our fees going to be? And they're trying to do those calculations. They can just automatically go back to the previous year, and every year it changes. That would be my recommendation.
Could we set it like a date that we know that we're going to amend this, if we're going to do it annually, that we're going to do it at the first of the year, or March 1st, whatever, so people know?
Here's an idea on that, yeah. So you could, just at the beginning of each year, you just say, this is what, you can do this obviously in resolution, set it up to where when you get to the beginning of each year, you're gonna go to the August of that previous year, because it comes out in August and February. So like, for example, if we were moving into 2025 this year, if you had it set up that way, you'd just be like, automatically, we would go to August 2024, and then when you go into 2026, then we'll go to August 2025.
Saying 4 out of the 7 counties you researched are doing it that way.
Correct, yeah, actually, 4 on the 24, and 2 of the 4 actually do every 6 months, so.
Is that your recommendation?
I think that would simplify things, and if you all want to head that direction, the once a year makes sense, and just fall back on the 24, or the year prior, the mid-year prior.
Commissioner Schroeder, you have any comments, sir?
Oh, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just curious how often we see a reduction instead of an increase on this chart as the years go on.
Yeah, and it really does vary, Commissioner. It's like, I don't have them in front of me, but we did, Rob and I looked at the different, the different versions, and, like, let's just take Group U, because we've been looking at that a lot, the accessory structures, right? So if you look at, the one, for example, the one we're using right now, 2022, and it's in your handout, and then if you looked at the 25 February, and if you looked at the price per square foot, it was $66.48 for the one we're currently using, and it would change if you went hypothetically to 25 February, it would be $66.20, so it would go down, but it literally, it does fluctuate, and it could be 20 cents, $1, 65 cents, and it can go one way or the other. Yeah.
But you don't see huge swings with that.
That's correct. Any other comments on Section A?
No, I think I've got some questions, but we can wait till we get in here.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if y'all are okay with us moving forward to B as in boy, the concept here would be applying a modifier. Basically, you could consider a 0.25 modifier. Really what this would be is a 25% reduction on that table. But what we're recommending is the Group U only. Again, those are the accessory structures. Those, again, are the ones that affect the common citizen, the pole barns, greenhouses, storage sheds, et cetera. And you can look at page 7 in the handout, and that shows the price per square foot on that ICC table. The current price, we talked about that. What we're currently showing for Group U is at $66.48. That's back to that 22 version that we're using. if you were to, and here's the example, so if you were to do the 0.25 modifier, that 25% reduction, you would just take 25% off of what that Group U category is for that price per square foot. So if we're currently at $66.48, then it would go down to $49.86. So, you know, so when you do the calculation, you would use that figure as opposed to what's on the chart, and you would do a 25% reduction. And that's all, you know, all I had really initially here on B, the modifier. Any questions, comments on that?
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
How did you arrive at the 25%?
Yeah, good question. You know, when we did the comparison to other jurisdictions, there was only one other, not to suggest that others in the state, you know, that they may use a modifier. El Paso County uses a modifier. The way they phrase it a little different. It's like a 0.91, so technically this would be a 0.75, but I used it in a different way to line up with the percent reduction with the 0.25. So theirs is really like a 0.09 modifier, okay, compared to this. And also then when we just started there and then looked at what the budget implications would be, and it seemed reasonable. We kind of started there and then landed there in the end, but just based on what those numbers looked like when we ran them out and compared to what, you know, current, you know, present fees would be compared to what it would be like if we did make an adjustment.
Okay, fair enough.
So you touched on one of my questions, and that's impact to the budget.
Yes.
So can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yes.
Or am I getting ahead of the game here?
We can go either way on it. Definitely have it prepared later in the presentation, looking at budget.
Let's just wait till, let's just stay in order.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.
Yeah, I'll take your lead on that. Thank you. Okay, anything else on B? All right, moving on to C, and this is adjusting the International Residential Code, the IRC permit fee table. And in your packet, if you'd refer to page 8, please. And on page 8, this table, where it says Elbert County adopted fee schedule valuation portion, it's highlighted in orange there. That section right below there, where you have the total valuation and the building permit fee, and you can see the different formulas there. First, you may want to consider updating to a current IRC permit fee table, and that's on page 11 of your packet, and that shows a 2024 version. Okay. Elbert County is currently using formulas from an older Universal Building Code document. The numbers on this fee schedule have changed only slightly over the years, so it's similar in a sense to the ICC table, where every 6 months the price per square foot fluctuates. Well, with this table, it really over 20 years, it just hasn't really moved much at all, okay? Any questions on that so far? On that?
Sure. Would it make sense then to have the tables aligned and use 2024, both tables, instead of using one from one period and one from another period? Wouldn't that make more sense?
That is a great option, and certainly something for y'all to consider. Yeah, if you wanted to line up the ICC table and the IRC table, and just you could have those change every year, like we discussed on the ICC table, where you turn the new year and you'd say, okay, well, for 2020, let's say 2026, we're gonna use the 2025 August table, and then when you break into the new year in '26, again, as an example, with the IRC table, this one we're talking about now, you could do the same and say, all right, we're going to now use the 2025, right?
What year is the one we're using now? It doesn't have a date on it.
Yeah, that one, it's literally, when we did the research on it, it was before the IRC was actually formed, according to our research. And it was just using the Universal Building Code document. So it could be well over 20 years old. If you look on page, let's see here, give you an example. If you would please turn to page 3 in the handout. And once you're there, you'll see our, just as a line item, for example, the total valuation, we showed $100,000, if you have $100,000 to $500,000 property in terms of valuation. The current formula, you can see it's $993.75 for the first 100,000, $560 for each additional 1,000, and then the 2024 IRC formula, it's $1,027 for the first 100,000 and $7 for each additional. So it's, over, whatever, 20 plus years, it doesn't seem like it's changed that much. And then, if my memory serves, looking at the 23, maybe looking at the 21 IRC table, I know we just kind of sprinkled in our research and looked at a few different ones kind of in between, and it seemed like there was like virtually no change for a number of years on this particular table. So for whatever reason, this table doesn't move much. So then the second component to this for C is considering, again, applying a 0.25 modifier, another 25%, just to the group U, that the accessory structures, the ones that affect the common citizen, okay? Page 3 of your handout, that does show, again, that shows the formulas and what they would look like. And if you reference that again, then that last section there, if we were to do a 25% modifier for the, for group U only, the accessory structures, you could see instead of our current formula at $993.75 for the first 100,000 and plus $560 for each additional 1,000, it would drop to $770.25 for the first 100K and then $525 for each additional. So that reflects that change, what that 0.25 modifier adjustment would look like if you were to go that route. Questions, comments, gentlemen, on C? If I may, moving on to D. This has to do, this option relates to, in quotes, other permits. If you go to page 8, please, you will see, again, same kind of document. This is part of our building permit fee form in terms of the calculations. And at the top, highlighted in orange, it says other permits. So these are those basement finishes, tenant finish, conversion of an existing garage or shop. And you can see the price per square foot. Those are just fixed numbers there. And basically, when you start running the calculations, you use that price per square foot for those types of permits, and you don't go to the ICC table that we talked about previously and look for that price per square foot. We just have them set here for these other permits. And again, these are types of permits that a lot of folks in the county may want to do at some point. So we looked at these. We actually did some research, consulted, some folks in the business, and it looked like these fees, there's an opportunity to bring some of those down. Okay? And what we are proposing are, again, fixed price per square foot rates, but at a different rate compared to the ones that are currently presented. And if you would go, please, to, let's see, where are we? Page 4, you will see it reflected there, those suggested adjustments. And to reiterate, the research did show that the current price per square foot could be seen as high, and there's an opportunity for you to consider adjusting those down.
So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Why do we distinguish between interior residential remodel and a basement finish after original build, for example? Why would there be a different price point for that? It's still an interior residential remodel, whether it's above grade or below grade or second story. I don't understand why there would be a differential there.
Rob, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. I'm trying to understand your question, so bear with me. So you said the interior residential remodel compared to the unfinished basement?
Yeah, wouldn't that, an interior residential remodel, wouldn't that include a basement finish? What is the difference if it's at grade, below grade, or second story? Why would we differentiate in price?
This is something that was introduced before my time. I don't have the answer for you on that one, but as you can see, our proposal is to even that out.
It is. It is. I'm looking at that, and there's still a differential, but I'm just curious why, maybe some history on why that was before your time, but it's strange to me that would be the case, and how we determine, how much to charge someone for an interior remodel, why we'd have a difference there. And then the other question in relation to that is unfinished basement in a new build. So you got an unfinished basement in a new build, you got an unfinished basement in an original build. We differentiate in price there as well.
So that difference is when it comes to when a production home is being built, typically for most cases, they don't finish the basement. So we charge that amount for that basement because it's unfinished space. It's not typically habitable space. When you finish the basement, now you've increased the value of the home, and so, of course, we're going to charge a little bit more for that because you've increased the value for the home.
Would that be the assessor that would charge for the increase in the value of the home? I'm just trying to understand how that works.
Sorry.
I'm just trying to understand how it works versus new build and an original build from somebody 20 years later wanting to finish their basement. Why we would charge them more? That's all I'm trying to get to.
Okay, so just so I can understand, trying to explain it, so we charge one fee for an unfinished basement when being built, the whole house.
Okay.
Then, once you buy the house, you move in, now you want to finish the basement, so then you're adding value to the home, so now we're going to charge according to that. So that's why you have the two separate basements. You have an unfinished once the house is built, and then you move in, and then now you want to finish the basement, so we'll now charge according to that.
And if I may too, I certainly understand the question in terms of, why the disparity there between the two. As Rob indicated, these were prices that we inherited, and that's fine, but, in terms of the proposal, it looks, as you can see, kind of evens that out.
Yeah, there's substantial adjustments.
Yeah.
I think it'll be well received, but just some clarification on why, just for why that would be. But
yeah, from my angle, the real answer there is I don't know the answer.
Okay.
on why the difference.
We can take the time today and moving forward to, make those changes and try to simplify it a little bit and combine some of those numbers, which it looks like you have. They were all over the board.
Yeah.
You got 115, 61, 53, 31, and now you're all at 30.
Yeah, 40
You know,
and
so-
30, yeah.
Yeah, so you've made some substantial progress. I was just trying to simplify it and understand where we're at.
Thank you, sir. And anything else on that section? Okay.
Let me ask you a question
Yes,
on
sir.
page 5 here. It says 2023, 579 contractor licenses issued. 2024, 296 contractor license issued.
Yes.
So that's a reduction, isn't it?
Yeah, and the reason for that, there was a resolution for the contractor licensing that was in, let's see, January of last year, to be exact. And part of that resolution stated that for 2024, any contractor license that was acquired in 23 would be good for 24. It was sort of like a pause in a sense, but any new ones that came in last year would they'd have to apply and pay for that fee as normal. And then, that's a nice segue just into kind of where we are now. So here we are in 25, and we're actually, moving into the first quarter, or toward the end of the first quarter, but, wanted to get your perspective on how to move forward with regard to contractor licensing fees. The current fees really, as you can see on page 4, they're $125 or $100. If you were to determine that the fees were high, you could, just throw out, reduce them by 50% as a possibility. There's also another angle, because we're kind of staggered now, right? Because we had some, that were good in 23, that were the new ones at that point, then we got new ones in 24. For, just kind of the mechanics, administrative side of it, it might be good to just, for everything for this year, just to start fresh and, maybe go back to every year. But if you deem these, that fee high and you want to bring it down, you could consider that, but just keep it going on more of an annual basis as opposed to staggering, then it's just a little more of a management thing. If you all say, no, if that's the way we want to do it, of course, we can work through that and do it. Just to simplify it, that would be the recommendation.
Thank you.
Sir.
I have a comment.
Sir.
That fee to me seems like a nominal fee already.
Okay.
It's $100 for an annual license. I don't see any reason why we would need to reduce that.
Okay, thank you.
That's my opinion.
Opposing view on that one. I've had heartburn on the contractor license since we did it.
Okay.
It was sold to us as a way to make sure that we didn't have fly-by-night companies coming through in the event of a hailstorm or something like that. I don't know how many of these outside companies that don't do business regular in the county are paying these, but it would certainly seem to me that it's the vast majority of people that are either live here and work here, or they do a lot of their work here, and it seems to be more of a detriment to them than a protection on the fly-by-night. I understand the idea behind it. The reason that we extended the time last year is it generated a whole lot more money than we ever intended for that to generate from what we were told to begin with. And so as far as putting that pause on and extending that, this wasn't intended to be a money maker for the county. It was intended just to be able to monitor the contractors out there. And so this doesn't need to be a profit center. It's more of just make sure we're covering our expenses on it, and that way we're still monitoring if there is an issue with fly-by-night companies, but yet it's not a burden on our local contractors either. So I'm in favor of keeping that just as low as we can, just make sure we're covering our overhead on it and going on with that.
Thank you for your comments.
I like the principle, it just $100 would seem to me that it was already a nominal fee. That's all.
Okay, great. Thank you for the feedback. Now, if we can look at, what these suggested changes would mean to the budget. Okay, so if you go to page 11, please. Or pardon me, actually, let's go to page 12. Page 12. Look at some budget figures. And what we did is let's start with Group U, the accessory structures again, and that 0.25 modifier, that 25% reduction on that price per square foot piece in Group U only. We looked at quarter 4 of 2024, then in what was brought in terms of those permits specifically. You can see there it showed the fees for Group U is about $86,000, and then we annualized that, just to bring it, just to have an idea of some possible numbers, close to $350,000. When you look at quarter 4, also you might have to consider seasonality, perhaps. Certain times of the year, obviously there can be more volume, but even in the end, if you wanted to put on another 10% or so, you could. Then if you look at the other, the right-hand side of that first little chart there where it says Q4 2024 building permit fees Group U, you'll see that it would reduce to $51,000 as opposed to $86,000 for that quarter, and then annualized it would go from 346 down to 205 in terms of 205,000. And again, that would just be that Group U 0.25 modifier. So with this category, Group U, taken all together, if you were to go to and I did just in this example, just said the February 2025 ICC table, but you could, the numbers would be slightly different if we went, let's say, to the 2024 August. You adopted that, then you for Group U, and then you did that 0.25 modifier, and then you take that 2024 IRC table, that permit fee table, and then do a 0.25 modifier on that for Group U only. Then you'd see about $140,000 reduction in 2025. So that would just be the Group U section. Any questions, comments on that? And in real terms, when you talk about the consumer, what does that mean? You can talk, okay, a 0.25 modifier, et cetera. When we looked at the individual fees that were paid compared to what they would have paid, you could say that's an approximate for just this Group U, about a 40% reduction of fees to the consumer for that category. If I may, just move on to that next category, which was the other permit fees. You can see that again on page 12 here, and what those numbers would look like. The same situation, we called up the numbers for Q4 of last year and then applied it to the whole year, ran that. If we made those adjustments, we could see a reduction of about $125,000. And that would be for the end consumer, just for that category, for those other permit fees. Again, those are the basement finishes and so forth. That could be an approximate 70% savings to the applicants for that category. Now, if you go to page 13 of the packet, the last page, you'll recognize that. That was the the same chart we used for the February 5 work study session with you gentlemen. And that is just a highlight taken out of the building department budget for 2025. It shows the revenue, it shows the expenses, and there would be about 1.1 million difference between expenses and fees. So that 1.1 million available, if all the numbers worked out for 2025 based on the projections, 1.1 million available for the general fund. If you were to make the permit fee adjustments that we've just outlined here, there could be about a $265,000 less revenue. So when you look at the numbers, there would be room for that, and that's certainly part of this overall consideration for you as it relates to the budget.
Are we anticipating any efficiencies on the expense side that will offset that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So really two pieces to this. One has to do with our community core software that was implemented in the last quarter of 2024, where because of this software, we're able to see some increased operational efficiencies, and then also with an increase in internal staffing that's happening right now, this is going to reduce the more expensive contract services, okay? So coupled, those two elements really could lend itself to this type of adjustment or for your consideration. And we had one other item that we wanted to bring up as it relates to shell structures. So it's one kind of late add, if you will, just another thing you might want to consider that just kind of ties into this, again, back to the types of adjustments that are possible that would impact the citizen that's trying to, get some work done on their house, right, more or less. Rob, would you like to just share what that possibility could be?
Absolutely. We've kind of had some complications with explaining the definition of a shell structure. So we kind of made some clarifications on things. So the present terminology, I guess, is let's see if I can get this correctly here. Shell-only structures include no interior, no lighting / electrical, gas, or plumbing. They are wood frame construction and are equal to or less than 4 walls and a roof. That is the current description. The proposed description, to help alleviate some of the confusion out there, is shell-only structures include no interior, no lighting / electrical, gas or plumbing, and no flat work. They are wood / metal frame construction of less than 750 square feet, equal to or less than 4 walls and a roof. So I have a few copies here if you just want to glance at it later on.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That, in essence, what that would do is just allow for a definition clarification and then classify certain permits in a category that would be less burdensome in terms of cost to the.
Where did you guys get the new definition?
It was a combination of many conversations with the building department, the permit text that we have, the conversations with the public. They just would like better clarification of it. And so in order to do that, this is where we came with the definition to clarify it even more.
So gentlemen, that is what we have for you today. We're certainly here to answer any other questions, and thank you.
I've got several things here I'd like to add
Yes, sir.
to the discussion. As far as the shell construction, the proposed language talks about less than 750 square feet. What if it's 1,000 square feet? What is we considered then?
So what we did is we did a little bit of research on typical buildings. Anything over 750 square feet is potentially used for maybe a writing arena, which can get a lot more into the valuation of it. So we came up with that number. We originally came up with, I think, 600 square feet, but then we plugged in a few more numbers into the computer, did a little bit more research into it, and that was the best number that we can come up with for that.
Fair enough. Just curious. So I assume, however we decide to move forward with this, it will come before us at a regular meeting. There's some other things I would like to get some more input from the building department on and see if it makes sense or not. One of those would be what your opinion would be if we had availability for set roofers and maybe some windows, different things to be able to submit pictures when they're completed for their final inspection instead of waiting for someone to come on site. I know that during COVID there were some of our surrounding counties that did that, and I think they've continued to do that with great success. And just curious if that was something that would work for us. I think it'd streamline things a lot for our guys out there working and speed up the inspections. And so I would, that I think I'd like to have more of a discussion on that as we make whatever adjustments we make here. You have any thoughts on that, Rob, on offhand?
So currently we do accept photos for roof inspections. And when it comes to windows, it varies. Since we only have 2 inspectors, a limited amount of time, some of these windows that are installed are quite a ways away and in between inspections. So it depends on the availability of the inspectors. We have accepted pictures for the windows. I don't feel comfortable. I'm used to being on site. You can get more eyes on things. I think people have a tendency of taking pictures of what looks good.
Sure.
And not what's right. So the more that we can be there in person, I feel a lot more comfortable with. But the photos has always been accepted for roofs, which even then we still run into problems, but we try to.
Okay. So right now, what do we accept pictures for?
Roofs.
Roofs? And that's it?
Yes, and occasionally, like I said, windows.
Occasion windows, but decks?
There might be a few other, there might be a few other, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. Maybe a ground plumbing inspection, because we want to, it's almost, I want to see, if a person reached out to me and asked if you can do a picture inspection, I would ask for a video. Because what I'm looking for in a ground plumbing is I want to see the gauge actually work and lose pressure when you test it. So there's different variables for different things. Sure. I mean, there's some leniency with some things, and obviously we need to be there in most of them.
Right. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. I like the concept, I guess is what I'm getting at. I think it helps our guys out in the field that are doing the work and moving along with that. As long as we're talking about reduction on fees, I think some of the other ones that we need to look at are some of these ancillary things like windows, hot water heaters, decks, those type of prices as well. Again, I think these are issues that we just need to make sure that we are covering our costs on, not trying to go over and above. Now, as I caution on costs, it's not just your department, because you have supportive departments that are involved. Finance, you have HR, you have IT. There's other departments that we realize that aren't revenue generating that are important for your be able to do your work as well, that need to be factored into that. But having those other costs, those fees reduced, I think encourages, particularly I think of decks. You know, how many decks get put up on the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that we're closed, and we never hear anything about it. We don't know anything about it, and part of it is because of the fees, and then that doesn't make it to the assessor's roll. And so somehow to find that sweet spot where the fee is low enough that everybody's willing to do it, they don't find it a burden, are willing to go get those fees so we can get those structures like a deck onto the assessing rolls, I think is the ultimate goal. Not a one-time fee, but an ongoing thing. And so with the assessor's office only going out hitting every home physically every 4 or 5 years, whatever the case may be, it might be 2 or 3 years before that actually gets on there if they haven't pulled a permit. So those are things that I'm curious about and want to make sure that we're with them. And part of that, I think, goes along with what you're talking about, the reductions here. And that gets those permits there. I'm pretty sure we get basements finished that we don't know about. There's probably a lot of things that take place out there that we don't know about, and it never makes it to the tax roll. And so ultimately, that's, I think, is a higher goal, is to get it on the tax roll than worried about the one-time fee. That being said, the one-time fee ends up being important as well. And making the, I'm encouraged by this, but making a change mid-year in a mid-budget year gives me a little bit of concern on what I'll do. We're discussing a lot of different things potentially that would be different than what the original budget was put out, and could have a significant impact at the end of the year. And so I think before we go any too much further, we need to sit down with management and kind of prioritize some of all the different things that we've been talking about over the last month. Not saying we can't do everything, but I'd sure like to have it prioritized so that we knew what, we hit certain levels that we can check this box. Because otherwise, it's pretty easy to go through money, and we need to make sure that we're being responsible with that. We have a fiduciary responsibility. I'm all in favor of reducing these fees. I think it's a great program. I know for one, my parents looked 10 years ago at putting up a detached garage, and then they saw the fees, and it just took them right out of the ability to do that. So, and I'm sure they're not the only ones in that boat. But at the same time, as I said, mid-year is difficult in working it into our budget and making sure that it's in the right priority list. And so that would be my encouragement, that we sit down and figure out a priority on what all the different things that we're looking at right now. But I like what I see.
Thank you. And we will look into those decks and windows, et cetera.
I'll just comment, I think you've done a great job with this program, and as Commissioner Schroeder said, it concerns me, and we talked about setting these things or reviewing them annually. I mean, we're talking about big numbers here, so I don't know, maybe we consider reviewing things every 6 months until we see that everything is stable and looking good, and instead of just doing this annually. What do you think?
I think Commissioner Buck made a good point that makes it's a little bit easier if it's done on an annual basis for people to get there. My heart burns in the middle of the year change and how that's going to work. But I do think that it's simpler for the homeowner. It's simpler for the contractor, where they can sit down and work out the cost for that year. It'd be pretty easy for them to do, as they're trying to figure out a certain date when this permit was pulled. What's the criteria
I'm in favor,
there?
total favor of this. I just scares me a little bit. I'll be honest with you. It's big numbers.
It's big numbers. It's a lot of money.
Commissioner Buck, your thoughts?
Well, that's why I asked if we had some cost savings and efficiency in the department to offset these reductions, and then pass that along to the citizen that wanted to make improvements to their property. Now, and if we went out and, brought up the fact that we had some reduction in our fees, and we let the citizenry know, we might get more people pulling permits. Oh, I'm not being overcharged. They don't feel like they're being overcharged. I'm not paying $3,000 to put my deck on. I'll pay $800, I'll pay $1,200, but I'm not paying $3,000. You know, so we'll get some of that if we promote this as, hey, look what we've done. We've saved money in the building department. We have some efficiencies. We've passed it on to the citizen, and we did our jobs. That's kind of where I'm at. Is what we need. I would like to make sure that we're covering those expenses as well, and make sure that we do have those efficiencies and we can rely on those efficiencies. I do have a couple other things I want to talk about. Sure. Plan review fees. Currently, they're at 65% of the permit fee. Okay, so in category U or group U, for example, you might have a shed or you might have a pole barn. And there was an example that came up maybe a couple of months ago where the plan review fee was $900 based on 65% of their permit fee. Well, the engineered plan for that project was only $500. How long does it take to review a simple pole barn and charge the citizen $900 when the engineered plan is only $500? So I think we need to take a serious look at how we're charging that and maybe base that on something different, maybe reduce that 65%. Now, some of those categories of buildings are more complex, and that plan review is going to take a lot more time and it's a lot more technical. But a simple shed or an outbuilding that we're talking about in Group U shouldn't be 65% of the, in my opinion, of the permit fee.
Yeah, thanks for those comments as well. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. As you recall, when we did the February 5 work study session with y'all, it was in terms of the comparisons to other jurisdictions, across the board, with the exception of one jurisdiction, it was all the 65% of the building permit fee, and El Paso County has a lower percentage. Like we shared in the last session, you know, all of these things in terms of the percentages of the fees, the formulas is up, you know, up to you all. You know, you have that discretion to adjust and change. The particular category, the Group U, as you just mentioned, kind of the plan review fee, you know, that could, you know, fall in line there with those types of evaluations and, you know, the complexity or lack thereof, perhaps. So we will put that on our list to explore further as well.
One more question, and then I'll be done. The consumer use tax. How are we handling that?
Go ahead.
The reason I bring it up is I had a citizen call me and say they paid sales tax at Home Depot or wherever, and then they were charged again at the county, and they'll be in this week to talk to us about it later in the week. They're making an appointment to do that. So I wanted to see how we handle that, how we charge that, and how that's handled.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll add that to our list of things to look at further. I know, Commissioner Buck, you and I did touch base briefly on the topic. Since that time, did a little digging, trying to make sense of it, just from my angle, because not real versed on, you know what the heck is a use tax, right? And, you know, how it relates to the state and the local jurisdiction, et cetera. In fact, I had a conversation with a representative at the Department of Revenue. Also had a chance to visit with our finance director and our county treasurer, trying to dig into it a little bit. And I've learned some things, so certainly it'll be good to learn a bit more and talk to y'all further about it. The use tax rates are set by, so the state has a consumer tax, consumer use tax, and then the local jurisdictions actually select the use tax and the sales tax rates that they want. So as you are aware, in Elbert County, we have a 1% sales tax, and then we also have a corresponding 1% use tax. And that actually went before the voters in 2007 in a general election on a general election ballot here in Elbert County. And that is when that 1% sales and 1% use tax was established here in this county. And there was a corresponding resolution in September of that same year from the Board of County Commissioners at that time detailing it. So I certainly will be able to share that with you. But it was really interesting too, just pulling off a document off the Department of Revenue at the state level and looking at all the municipalities and the counties and just comparing the sales tax rate and the use tax rate and how it just varies, and it's very dependent on the locals in terms of what the voters say is the way to go.
So if they're paying the sales tax when they purchase the materials, do we still charge them on top of that an additional sales tax and additional use tax if they pay the sales tax when they purchase the materials? So that would be my question.
Yeah, and that's the question I haven't arrived at. The answer to that question I haven't gotten to yet. So we're still working on that.
So my concern is that we are charging it, and the citizen that's coming in this week are saying they've been double taxed, and they want a refund. So that's going to be the conversation we have later this week. And if we can look at the documents that they present and see what they have to say, and then we can just kind of do the homework and figure out what's going on with that particular applicant. But we need to make sure that that hasn't been happening or that we've been doing it correctly. So we need to really look at that and make sure that we're following Colorado state law as far as the consumer use tax is concerned.
Yeah, this the taxation piece here, it's a little out of my wheelhouse, but we're trying to dig into it and see what we can come up with, and of course we'll consult with experts along the way to clarify some of these questions.
So, I might have some information on that because we dealt with this a lot when I was at the clerk's office with motor vehicle, and people would get the 1% sales tax on there, plus wherever they're charged at where their home was. I think probably building material is a little bit different because the municipality, Parker, Castle Rock, wherever they're at Home Depot, has their own set of sales tax. So the sales tax is paid, but the use tax would be separate, as is my understanding of that.
Here's a quote. It says, construction and building materials are exempt from sales taxes imposed by any county, statutory city, or home rule city if the purchaser of such materials presents to the seller a building permit or similar documentation showing that local use tax has been paid or is required to be paid. The exemption from city and county sales tax applies even if the materials are purchased outside of the city or county. So,
yeah, it's a complex topic, and I need to learn more on it for sure, and we'll...
I just think it needs to be part of our fee discussion today and going forward. I think it needs to be included in the discussion. I think it's an important piece, and I think we need to make sure we get that right.
Yeah, and again, in terms of just, the structuring of how a building department comes up with a permit fee, it's very, it's universal based on, our research and, previous experience in terms of the different categories. You have, again, your building permit fee side, then you've got your plan review, and then the use tax. So, yeah, I mean, this is common practice with regard to the use tax, but it's in terms of, the intricacies and the complexities behind it, that's something where, I'll have to learn more on how all that works, to be sure.
All right, Commissioner Buck, do you have any other questions?
That's all I had.
All right, Commissioner Schroeder, do you have any other questions? Gentlemen, any final comments?
I have none. Do you, Rob?
No, sir.
Okay, great.
Right.
Let me ask, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was just going to ask, do you have any questions, sir?
No, I think we're making progress. It's good to hear from the board as to expectations. That way the staff can look into those areas a little deeper and see where we're at. Then we'll set up another meeting when they have answers to these questions, and hopefully we'll get to a place where everyone's comfortable, and certainly where we as staff are carrying out the direction that the board wants.
All right, thank you, sir. Mark, do you have any other comments?
No final comments. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
I do not.
All right, well, I'll say you've gotten off to a great start, and I thank you for doing that, and look forward to getting some resolution with this soon. So, all right, with that, we'll end this meeting, and time is exactly 4 p.m. We made it within an hour. We're doing pretty good. All right, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you.